What does it say on YouTube?
welcomes you to MAU 2022.
Good day, delegates watching us from all over the world. I am Osai Sean Michael from the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the co-director of the Administration and Finance Department for the Model African Union Conference 2022. Today, I will be your co-host alongside Kudirat Abiola, who happens to be my co-director in Administration and Finance. Welcome to our very first Executive Roundtable. I know you must be wondering what this is. In essence, this program is set to bring to you delegates face-to-face, or rather screen to screen with distinguished personalities from all over the world, leaders at the forefront of policy making, change engendering, and advocacy in their respective fields. This executive roundtable will take place in 3 sessions. In the first 2 sessions, we will have wonderful interviews with these distinguished speakers of ours, and we will round up with a third where you, yes, you delegates, will be able to ask these people wonderful questions, glean from their insights, sharing their inspiring journeys. It's going to be amazing. But before we begin, stay with us as we enjoy this wonderful performance from our very own Sabika Bello from the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Charity begins at home, they say. At home, I see the daggers and the bullets firsthand in the neighborhoods, how they cost lives and dreams as they cut and pierce through flesh and skin. At home, I see hatred and how it burns, how we choke on the smoke, cough out the lies, the guilt and the cries. We are known for creativity, for bravery, blackness and slavery. We, the slaves to our very conscience, our very minds and the games they play on you and me, on us, on humanity, games of insanity, of inhumanity, the audacity of man to showcase brutality, to cause another's death and coerce prejudice unto their last breath. At home, when the clouds come together, dark, dense, almost as heavy as the weight of the corpses being stacked and buried, drops of hatred cascade and soak into the soils of our land, grow and sprout chaos. Then love and peace fester beneath the soils of our very same lands, ruin the toils of our very brave heroes, ruin the dreams of our very great. At home, there are artists who paint and make mosaics from blood of the slaughtered, ashes of the lynched, and remnants of burnt down homes. At home, we take pride in the gallantry of past lion hearts and what they achieved of unity and concord, yet we still flee the cold touch of one another's hands to another supposed home that beckons us into uncertain survival. But for safekeeping, we shall write this in the pages of what we hope to someday call history, so that when we walk down the streets of our homes given charity, we remember that beyond the fence of our houses, beyond the diagram of one country on the map, beyond every borderline, wherever in the gut of this clay-colored giant, Africa is home.
Wow, that was very inspiring, and I learned so much from the spoken word piece. So now we are going to be introducing you to our panelists. Michael, would you like to start?
Definitely. I have here with me the very own Ms. Dipshika Pamasa. A little bio, so you can know who exactly has joined us today. Ms. Dipshika graduated from the African Leadership Academy in 2015. During her time at ALA, she participated in the Harvard Model United Nations. She was also a moderator for the ALA Model African Union and served as the chairperson for the NEPAD committee discussing maternal health in sub-Saharan Africa at the 2014 African Leadership Academy Model African Union. Ms. Dipshika graduated from Bucknell University with a BA International Relations with a focus on culture and identity in Africa. In her first year at Bucknell, she attended TED Women in San Francisco, which sparked her passion for storytelling and public speaking coaching. She organized 2 TEDx events and was a speaker coach for 3 TEDx events. In her junior year of college, Dipshika studied public international law at the University of Geneva, Switzerland, and she also worked with Kofi Annan at Africa Progress Panel. In the spring semester, she studied development in sub-Saharan South Africa with the School for International Training in Uganda and worked with the Private Education Development Network, teaching social and financial literacy to various communities around Kampala. Ms. Dipshika was recently elected as Prime Minister at the Mauritius National Youth Parliament 2019. Publicly drive the conversation to promote youth female representation in politics in Ireland. In November 2020, she decided to take a step forward and she ran for the village council elections as an independent candidate representing her hometown. Even though she wasn't elected, this experience only confirmed her drive to keep pushing the limits in the public leadership sector. Ms. Dipshika currently serves as a member for the African Leadership for Governance, a network committed to building accountable institutions and strengthening governance across Africa. She's also the co-founder, advocacy, and operations manager for Minority in Africa, an online digital company where they strive to create space for minoritized communities across the African continent. Wow. Would you like to introduce our next speaker?
Wow, that is so inspiring. Our second speaker is Kagiso Meataza. Kagiso is an 18-year-old student at the African Leadership Academy from Johannesburg, South Africa. She is currently a youth member at the South African Institute of International Affairs and has worked on policies for intergovernmental organization projects where she has presented to the United Nations COP25, COP24, and COP26. She commented on the Southern African Development Community's Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan. From a national perspective, she co-drafted for the Youth Climate Change Action Plan for the city of Joburg. Recently, she took charge of her policy drafting journey by leading and managing the drafting process of the Afrofeminist Freedom Charter. The charter consists of diverse voices at ALA and allows ALA students to bring forth solutions to some of the challenges they face at school. Within multilateral organizations, she has hosted a UNICEF Global fundraising events. Additionally, she was a panelist at a youth dialogue that was hosted by UNICEF South Africa with the United Nations Special Rapporteur. Furthermore, she worked in partnership with the UN Women, UNICEF, UNFPA, and the African Union Youth. She has worked with news networks including CNN Africa and BBC International on spreading awareness about African solutions for African problems. She also serves as the chair of a youth-led movement called the Conscious Campaign, which is working to decolonize systems through mobilization of the youth. She is an international debater. She was part of the Indian International Model United Nations Conference held in Pune, India, where she came forth. Lastly, Kagiso writes for the African Matters Initiative, the African Leadership Academy newspaper, The Bridge. She also wrote an article about the importance of female leadership in African policy-making spaces. To promote Pan-African collaboration among young people, she's currently developing a comic book project about African revolutionaries. Wow, this is so inspiring. And one thing I like about the MAU conference is you don't just simulate the African Union, but you get to hear from people who are actively involved with policymaking from a national and international perspective. So we are so happy to have you here, and thank you for honoring our invite.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah. Amazing. So I guess we can jump right into the questions. I mean, it is obvious, we have with us here very, very decorated personalities. And the first question we'd love to ask is, in all that you have been through, what would you say is just one experience, one lesson that stands out? Please.
Oof, I think that's hard. But I think for me, it's you have to start somewhere. Because I think for me, I knew that I wanted to be the Prime Minister of Mauritius since I was, I think, 8 or 9. And I mean, for me at that point, it was just about, getting to ride fancy cars and, live in like a fancy house. But the more I grew up and I learned about the complexity of what it looks like to actually be a leader in a country, I realized that it is so hard to even start. But the point is, you got to do it. I think for me, it's for the longest time, especially in Mauritius, we've had a lot of young people complaining about their current situation where they're not satisfied with what's going on. They want things to be different. And to me, it's like, I get it. We want things to be different, but one of us has to do something about it. We just cannot spend the rest of our life complaining. So I think for me, it's you got to start somewhere. As much as it's hard, you have to do it. And sometimes, even if you start, it doesn't mean that you will get to be there to see the end result. Because a lot of times what happens is that, right, like for me, it's the idea that even if I do not get elected one day, but at least I'm making it easier for the next young woman who comes after me, who has it easier because someone has tried before. And so just start, for me, it's, you got to start.
I think one lesson I learned from my mom was always that change is change nonetheless, whether big, whether small, whether medium. I think an example that she always used to make was that how can you expect to change the world and to tidy up the world as a climate activist if you can't even tidy up your own bedroom? I think even at church, something that was always taught that was that, being diligent and being a leader is even in the minute details. Yeah. And so when we look at these grandiose things, I mean, you're hearing that I was a part of a UN project, you're hearing that she's the prime minister or the youth prime minister of Mauritius. We started small. We started with the smallest changes. And so not neglecting those things and looking at the small things and looking at how they can build up to one big change is really, really important. And I think for me in my leadership journey, one thing that was really important was self-reflection and constantly learning and constantly growing. I mean, being a leader that speaks and knows what to say is really important, but you can't be speaking from an empty mind. You always have to inform yourself. You have to be a lifelong learner and a lifelong teacher to be a good leader.
Wow. Thank you so much for those answers. And I think this makes me remember this quote that says, you cannot do the big things without doing the small things. As a leader, you need to be willing to serve the people, not just about the titles and the prestige that comes with it, but actually passion for community service. Okay, absolutely. So this brings me to my next question. So for people who are actually passionate about community service and volunteering and giving back to society, how do you think they can start? For people who don't know, how to go about it?
I think the first good way to start is to ask questions, is to know that you don't know everything and that there are people who have walked your path. I think humans have this thing of thinking that we're special and we're unique in everything that we do. And I am special, I am unique, but the reality is that the path that I'm walking has been walked by someone else in one way or another, maybe not in the same way or in the same manner or in the same context, but I'm going through something that another person has gone through. So asking questions, going to your mentors, going to your teachers, Googling answers, doing research about what you're passionate about, I think that it can help you start. I think starting is the hardest part of leadership. It's the hardest part of advocacy, because it's like, where do I start? Do I start with tackling racism? Do I start with tackling climate justice, gender? But then starting with asking questions and knowing who to seek help from is just really, really important. And I think another way of starting or honing your passion is also believing in yourself, because you can't expect other people to find strength in you and to believe in you if you do not believe in your own voice. And as a person of different marginalized communities, firstly, I'm Black, I'm a woman, and those intersections, it's very difficult to navigate my imposter syndrome and being in male-dominated spaces, being in spaces where a lot of people are old or a lot of people are white. It's like, okay, I don't know what to do now. But then one thing I have had to navigate is I'm here. I deserve to be here. What does Dean Hatton say? Dean Hatton, the Dean of the African Leadership Academy, always says, you are here because, here wants you to be here. You deserve to be here. Your voice is welcomed in this space. This is your continent. Who is to say that you shouldn't be here? And even there's this quote by Mandela that says, who are you not to be fabulous and talented and gifted within these spaces? You are here because you deserve to be here. I can say that all the time and for the whole day, but I just think that believing in yourself and believing in yourself through your posture, your presence, and through the things that you say, the way that you interact with other people, not feeling small, but building yourself up to be big enough for those spaces, so important.
Yeah, wow. I mean, I think speaking of quotes, right, I was talking about that earlier with you guys, but a quote that really pushes me to do everything that I do in my life is the quote by Shirley Chisholm, where she says, if there is no seat for you at the table, bring a folding chair, right? And that's in line to what you just said about starting things, right? If there is no table, then build your own table, right? Find the right kind of people that aligns with your passion, who have similar views, but also different views than you are, right? And then start it. If one of you wants to, as delegates, you want to start the Model African Union in your school or in your community, it doesn't exist. Ask questions. Who are the people who want to be involved? start an MAU club or start the conversations about, the different issues happening on the continent. You can start small of having the conversation, and it's the small thing that is going to lead to the big changes, right? So just start by having that conversation, even if it's just one person, if it's your neighbor, your sibling, or your parents, right? One person is more than enough to help you share your vision and spread your ideas to a bigger community. So I agree with you, start asking the right questions and building your own table.
And just to piggyback off of what Ms. Deepshika just said, I think it's also important to understand that not everyone will understand you, and people will challenge you. I think I came from a very, very racist school. And so when it came to being pro-Black and Pan-African within those spaces, it was very foreign. It was very foreign for white people to hear me say that, this is not your land. Or it was very foreign for a lot of white kids to be challenged about saying the N-word or the K-word, which are derogatory terms in South Africa. But being a person that was very astute and staunched in my beliefs, I stood there and I was like, hey, Mandela believed in this, and Thabo Mbeki believed in this. The very builders of the Rainbow Nation project in South Africa believed in this. And therefore, I belong here. This is what my constitution is saying. And understanding that I needed to help other people understand me, and that they wouldn't just initially understand me from word go. It was so difficult, but it was a part of the journey. Not everyone is going to understand you. Not everyone is going to be on your side. Not everyone is going to say, okay, Khaliso, I get why you're Pan-African, or I get why you're standing up against, all these racist and sexist systems. But understanding who you are and having a purpose-driven passion, having a purpose-driven dream as a leader is so important, because that's what's going to help you not be wavered in your journey.
Yeah.
That's
and,
very amazing.
It's incredible. And I'm amazed. I'm wowed, because this is what we're here for. This is what MAU is about, giving people an opportunity, a platform to start. We've said a lot about starting, but I couldn't but wonder, as women, as you have expressed in leadership offices, I can imagine it's been challenging. Yeah, I can imagine it's as a man saying this, I'm a bit, but I can imagine it's been challenging, and I just wanted to ask if you wouldn't mind sharing what some of those challenges have been, and how you have overcome, and stayed, like, Khaliso said, astute, resolute in your passions to continue to do the things that you do.
Can I start?
Please.
So for one of the things that I hosted with UNICEF Global for the fundraiser, I think they were asking me to tell a story about, who I am as Khaliso Miataza. So basically, I was going to tell them a story about how my mom is unemployed, and there was a drought in South Africa, and the drought led to a rise in prices. And so as a single mother living in a single household, that had a huge toll on us. But the way that they had wanted me to narrate my story was in a very I'm a hungry African child way. And recognizing my privilege as a part of the South African middle class came with saying that, no, yes, my mom is unemployed. And yes, I do live in a very financially stressed home right now, but I'm not going to sell a narrative that is not true to me. I don't want to take up a space that I'm not supposed to take up, because that's not my story. If you want that story, get it from someone else, give someone else the platform. Because I guess in realizing my privilege and recognizing my privilege, I had to be like, okay, this is not my space. Let me pull back, and standing up for myself in that moment and saying that this is not my narrative. I don't know what you guys are trying to sell. It was really difficult, because it was like, oh my God, this is the UN, this is UNICEF. These are the people that are going to be giving me a red passport so that I don't have to apply for visas or whatever. But it was also I'm drawing my boundaries. Drawing boundaries within leadership is very, very important. And I know that Ms. Deepshika is very passionate about drawing boundaries within leadership and within governance. I think it's just, it was very difficult, because within your leadership journey, there's always moments where you have to assess why you're doing things. Am I doing this because I want to stop being oppressed, or am I doing this because I want to stop oppression altogether? And so recognizing your privilege within those spaces, and recognizing that, okay, maybe here I made the wrong decision, or maybe here I'm buttering up to these people because I've lost my way and I've lost my purpose. Taking that step back is very difficult, but also standing up for yourself in spaces that are supposedly for your voice is just, it's so difficult, because people want to dilute your voice for their narrative all the time. And it's just hey, that's not my narrative. I don't want to take up that space for another African child. Yes, that narrative is very valid and it is very real, but if you want that narrative, get it from someone who has actually lived that. I do not live that. I live in one of the most affluent suburbs in South Africa. And so that's not my experience. And admitting that, sitting in that, and saying that on a Zoom screen to all these white people in Geneva, in New York, and it's like, they were like, okay, we get it, okay. It was difficult, but they understood.
Thank you so much.
The importance of staying true to your narrative.
Actually.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I feel like you just hold my story too, because I could relate to so many things that you just spoke about, I think for me, the biggest moment was when I was running for office in Mauritius, right? And I was a 25-year-old woman just going around to like strangers in my hometown saying that this is what I want to do for my hometown. And this is why I think, it's going to benefit you. It's going to help you. And not just you, but the people that's going to come after you, right? And every single time I was met with, but why are you doing this? Aren't you better like finding a husband, getting married? That was the most like the common thing that I would get, right? Because as you said, sometimes people don't get your vision. And I think that's okay too, because it's similar to opinions. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but it's about finding out, okay, which voice do I listen to first? Is it the voice that's telling me I should get married, I should find a husband? Or the voices, even if it's just 1, 2, or 10, that's saying, I see where you're going. I believe in that and I want to help you with it, right? So I think for me, it was just really navigating that situation of figuring out in the midst of all of that noise, which one mattered the most that's going to help me bring me closer to what I wanted to do, right? And I think for me, it's been a great learning journey, because trying to get into politics as a young person is really hard, just because I feel like it's so guarded with the people at the top, right? Like there's not a lot of information about how do you get in this? How do you get started? What is it that you should be doing? There is no information out there. For example, if I wanted to become a doctor, I know that I go to the school, I study this, I do that, whatever internship, and then I become a doctor, right? Eventually. But when it comes to that, it's so hard, right? So I think for me, being actively part of running for office in Mauritius in 2020 really helped me understand firsthand experience how the electoral process goes, right? And let me tell you, there was a lot of weird things happening at that time, but I couldn't say anything, right? So that's another thing, right? You see things happening around you. And I felt like this was a point where, do I stand up and speak for the injustices that I saw around me, right? I could see ballots just leaving the room like that open, right? But everyone saw what was happening, but no one said anything, right? And that was the moment where I was like, but this is not how it should be, right? Which is why to me, that's like, my purpose is to make sure that everyone's voice is heard on that national stage, because the people who we elect are the ones who are supposed to represent us, right? And then I want to see someone who looks like me out there, because I didn't get that representation when I grew up. I didn't see anyone who looked like me there, right? But I wanted to make that happen for the other people who come after me, right? For the young people, the young women who come after me, right? So for me, that is the reason that I keep going back to even the comments about, you should get married, or you should do this, or you should do that, or like have a set and stable career. To me, it's like, no, that's not why I want to do this, right? I want to be there and show up and stand up for others who deserve to be heard as well, right? And provide that space. So I think for me, it's just continuously fighting what's happening outside to make sure that there is that space for every single person to be heard as well.
Wow. Thank you so much, Ms. Chika. And I would just like to ask you a follow-up question from there. So as a person who serves as the Prime Minister of the National Youth Parliament in Mauritius, so I would like to ask, you're currently in a position of office that has never been held by a female before, or a woman rather. So I want to know, how challenging has it been, and what obstacles have you faced, and how have you been able to overcome these challenges?
I think the biggest thing has been people's expectation. The narrative that's been going around is they're waiting for me to fail, because women are held at such a higher standard than men when it comes to these positions, that they're waiting for me to just do one small mistake for them to be like, see, we elected a woman, she failed, so that's why we don't elect women, right? So for me, it's like trying to fight that expectation and that pressure of letting those voices dictate my moves and the things that I do and the decisions that I want to take, right? So I think that has been something that has been constant, and it has been in the back of the mind, I'm not gonna lie, of like, okay, but I want to do this, but does that mean that they will not like this? How are they? And when I say they, are like the people at the top, which is mostly men in power, right? So every time I'm like, okay, but if I do this, does that mean that they're not gonna like it? Okay, but then like, how do I navigate their disappointment? And then at some point I'm like, but I was elected for a reason. The young people trusted me for a reason, right? Why am I letting these people dictate my move, right? So I think for me, it's figuring out where do I assert myself and in what spaces that voice matters most. I think it's something that I'm constantly doing, right? And I think it's part of the learning journey, because something that I've realized is also admitting that I don't know everything about everything.
Yes.
Right? There are moments where like people would look up to you and be like, okay, but no, you're like the prime minister, you should be knowing everything. And I'm like, no, I don't have to. And it's okay, because that's why we're here. We want to learn together. We want to be better together. It's not about me being there, getting better while the rest of you is just watching. We're all in this together, right? So admitting that it's okay that I don't know a lot of things about everything, but that's why we're here, because we want to learn from each other, right? Yes, I am unique. I am my own person, but there's so many other things that I still have to learn from others. That's only going to make me better. So I think for me, it's being vulnerable enough to say that, listen, guys, yeah, I'm here, but I'm still learning. So let's find a way where we can learn together.
Wow. I'd have to, hold us there because we are running out of time, but just one last question, for our lovely viewers, delegates, passionate leaders that are watching us from all around the world. What is one piece of advice that you'd give our viewers, whoever they may be?
Do you want to go?
Okay, I think the first piece of advice. Oh, you said one piece of advice. I think, wow, okay, then
No,
I
just
don't. Okay, the first piece of advice would be that you have to be a person that's always listening. You have to remind yourself to listen to your people, just like what Ms. Deepshika was speaking about now. I think there was this lesson that I learned from a doctor from this hospital called Baragwanath Hospital in South Africa, and he's the head of the pediatric renal department. And I was just like, oh, Professor, I forgot his name, Professor something. Like, how does it feel to know everything? And he was like, as a person, you never know everything. And even the professor, the head of pediatric renal what's at the biggest hospital in South Africa, does not know everything. How do you expect like an 18-year-old to know everything? How do you expect someone who is like Miss Deepshika to know everything? I think having some grace for yourself and allowing yourself to be a listener and to be a learner is so important when you're a leader. You can't be the voice of the people when you aren't listening to the voices of the people. I think another piece of advice would be that you have to be a person that is very cemented in who you are. So that you can't be led astray. If you're cemented in who you are, and okay, sometimes you can be flexible, you can learn, you can listen to other people's opinions, but then when you're cemented in who you are, you know what guides your principles, you know what guides your decisions, so that you aren't led astray. So for me, one of those things, or two of those things, are the Bible and my mother. My mother is someone who's by the law, by the Bible. And so understanding that and then also adapting that to my liberal and leadership life has been really important, because it's okay, I understand that when I walk into a room, I have to walk into a room like God sent me there. When I'm listening, I have to listen in the Bible, it says you have to be a correctable person. But then when my mom is teaching me, she teaches me three things through music and through her word and through her experiences. And I'm like, okay, my mom made this mistake. Let me learn from it, and guiding myself through those two principles, through the principles of the people that mean the most to me, of the things that mean the most to me, is just really important, so that you aren't led astray. And I think the third one would be that you need to be open to, you said one piece of advice, African leaders are very notorious for speaking over time, but the third piece of advice would be that you need to be challengeable as a person. You need to be open to opposition. A lot of the African leaders that we are criticizing now are not open to opposition. They're not open to being challenged. And I think choosing your opposition, choosing the voices to listen to, as Ms. Deepshika said, is very important, because it allows you to grow as a person. It allows you to navigate how to use your voice and how to narrate elevate your voice for other people. It allows you to see when you should be the voice behind the microphone and when you should be the speaker that is giving other people a platform to speak louder. You know, like being a challengeable voice. It also teaches you that, okay, this is my opinion, and I know that it has been informed by this, this, and this. You need to know what you're speaking about as a leader, because people want to see you fail. As a like for me, as a Black woman in South Africa, people want to see you fail all the time, and they'll ask you questions about climate change. They'll even ask you, Khati, so how do you solve climate change in 2 months? Okay, let me tell you, you know, according to this, this, and this, works cited list, MLA citation, you need to know what you're speaking about as a person. When you know what you're speaking about, when you know who you are, other people will know who you are.
Wow. Ms. Tipshika, would you like to add anything?
Honestly, I feel like I don't have anything to say. This is perfect.
This is a whole book.
No, it is. And I love it. No, I actually love it so much. I feel like I should have my notebook and just write some of these things down. But I think for me, the only thing I'd say is show up. Show up, whatever form that looks like. If your neighbor, right, she's a young person who's trying to do something for that community, show up to that event. Be there, find ways where you could support them. You know, even if it just means standing next to that person, it has so much power when you're standing next to a person who's doing a hard thing. I think just showing up is the most important thing that you can do as a person, as a young person, right? If there's an event, if there's a cause, there's something that's happening in your community or like on the national level that you are close to and you identify yourself with that specific cause, show up. If you don't know where to start, just show up, be there, learn from others, listen to what others have to say so you can figure out for yourself, okay, this is what the person is saying about this issue. Okay, so now what is my voice in the midst of all of that, right? But by showing up, you're able to open yourself up to possible solution ideas, possibilities, so many opportunities. And I think you talked about that really, but I'm a stickler for boundaries, right? Showing up, but also remembering what your boundaries are. Knowing that like there are times when you need to prioritize your mental health first and foremost. I think that is so important because we're young, we have the energy, we have so much drive, so much everything. We want to be everywhere at the same time, right? But we both know that we all know that is not possible sometimes. So knowing when it is okay to take a break, whatever that breaks look like, even if it's like me watching like 10 episodes of Grey's Anatomy at a go, or like sleeping for 10 hours, like whatever break looks like for you, I think it's important for you to take that because then you're able to be there 100% for the next time you're showing up.
Wow. But Ms. Dipshika, this is just one more question. So we'd like to know how like your previous experiences, your leadership experiences and participation in high school and university has equipped you to, you know, lead the position that you're leading today.
You know what? It's so funny because, for example, like when I was an ALA student, I was just going through the motion. I was going to African studies class. I was going to EL class. I was doing MAU. I was doing a lot of different things. But when I was a student, it was just about, there's something that I always say that right now I'm just collecting the dots so that in 5 years I can connect all of these dots together, right? So I'm doing all of these different things because I'm just building myself and finding myself as a person, right? But it was only when I even graduated from college, I went back to Mauritius that I realized all of these different things. So when we talk about values at ALA, what are your values? What are your passion, right?
You figure who you are.
Exactly. Like I felt more informed about who I am as a person. So I feel like when I was in high school, I wasn't really thinking that much. I was just doing a bunch of things. Of course, no boundaries then, because you just want to do everything, right? So I think for me, I wanted to be open to possibilities and opportunities because I know that I was in a very privileged place where not everyone in Mauritius had the same opportunity, right? Because not a lot of people knows about ALA, right? So when I came here, it felt like I had to do the most so that I could take all of these experiences and then move back to Mauritius so I can like help other young people find these opportunities or similar opportunities, right? So I think being in high school was about collecting these dots, collecting MAU, collecting, you know, like EL classes or like African studies classes so that now I feel like I'm a better position to connect all of these dots and give those to like the younger people coming in. So I think for me, it's just trying things and being in the moment.
Wow. I feel like this is just a message to delegates to just go out there, to just show up, you know, network with people who have the same ideas as you, who are actually passionate about the African continent or your country, even if you're not from Africa. So just about showing up and making the right connections with people and actually acting on your passion and giving back to society as well.
And also finding a balance, because you're not just an advocate, you're also a student.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
I know a lot of us are doing Cambridge and CIEs in like 2 weeks. And so it's really important that you also find the balance between who you are as a student, who you are as an activist or an advocate, and who you are personally. Like separating those things and also finding the intersection between them is really important.
Wow. Well, this has been exciting. It's been informative. It's been inspiring.
Okay, so thank you so much for coming. Right now we have a presentation by an African Leadership Academy student, Salima, who wrote a song about leadership on the African continent, and we would be watching her presentation now.
We'd like to thank you for being with us. I'd like to say a big thank you to our viewers that are still with us now, but don't leave. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
It's not a joke anymore, the ocean is on fire. Try a little harder to follow. It's not a joke anymore, your leader is a liar. The pill's a little hard to swallow. Half of the world is vaccinated, the other half is suffocated. Wave after wave, you are enslaved. If you misbehave, you're in for the decade. Half of the world does not have a dick. Act like a prick, think they're entitled. Only if she could lead, the word would only bleed once a month. It's not a joke anymore, the ocean is on fire. Try a little harder to follow. It's not a joke anymore, your leader is a liar. The pill's a little hard to swallow. Genocides are set aside, silence for peace of mind. The strip is burning to the ground, homes are stolen, hopes are drowned. Cease to appease, a call for peace. Do I believe you think I'm naive? It's not a joke anymore, the ocean is on fire. Try a little harder to follow. It's not a joke anymore, your leader is a liar. The pill's a little hard to swallow. Venezuela to Tigray, rowing Swatini, Palestine. There are crimes you decide not to see. Giants cause pollution, make up the illusion that your metal straw will save the world. Venezuela to Tigray, rowing as Swatini, Palestine. There are crimes you decide not to see. Giants cause pollution, make up the illusion that your metal straw will save the world. It's not a joke anymore, the ocean is on fire. Try a little harder to follow. It's not a joke anymore, your leader is a liar. The pill's a little hard to swallow. It's not a joke anymore, you know it never was. Not just a fuss, but reality. It's the century of tragedy. Humanity under arrest.
Welcome back. Welcome back. That was an amazing performance by Salima, don't you think?
Yes, it was very inspiring.
All right, we'll be going into our next segment. Would you like to introduce the next guest speaker?
Okay, so for the next panelist, we have Ms. Tosin Durotoye. Ms. Tosin Durotoye is a woman in tech, social impact leader, and a Forbes featured equity and diversity advocate. Ms. Tosin is currently an innovation strategist at Delta Airlines, the largest revenue generating airline in the world. She's also a principal consultant at Concelia Advisory Practice, a management consulting firm offering management services for technology startups, private, governmental, and non-profit entities. She has over 17 years of public and private sector experience in technology, innovation, and digitization, project and program management, and strategic partnerships and business development. Prior to her current role, Ms. Tosin served as the Chief Operating Officer at Fillmore Real Estate, where she led the establishment and launch of Collab Africa, a pro-tech-focused subsidiary company. She also led the establishment of the Greenhouse Lab, the first female-focused tech accelerator in Nigeria, and the only powered by Google accelerator in Africa. She has also served as the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Framework, a Boston-based edutech company, and worked for 8 years at NeighborWorks America, an NGO founded by the United States Congress. There, she managed programs for 250 network organizations and grants totaling over $10 million. Tosi is passionate about the intersections between public and private partnerships and investment in economic development and social impact. She's a Forbes featured diversity and equity advocate and the founder of Bloom Africa, a platform and community where ambitious women and girls gather, connect, and bloom. She's a public speaker and has presented the African Venture Capital Association, London, United Kingdom, Atlantic Dialogue, Morocco, Observer Research Foundation, Rwanda, PropTech Africa, South Africa, Women in Africa, Morocco, and Access Bank, Nigeria, to name a few. She's an Atlantic Dialogue's emerging leader, Princeton Alumni Corps emerging leader, Women in Africa ambassador, Leading Ladies, Nigeria's 100 most inspiring women, most influential people of the African descent, 100 over 40, and 100 under 40, and a charter member for the West Africa Alumni Shelter of Delta Sigma Theta, a 108-year-old public service organization. Thank you so much, Ms. Tosi, for coming.
We're absolutely delighted to have you.
Okay, so
thank you. I didn't know you would have to read the bio. I'd have made it a little shorter for you. So well done, though, Kudi. Thank you.
So to begin with, through your bio, we have seen that you have been very involved in public service, community service, and a lot of organizations that are empowering women like Bloom Africa and the Power Girl Leadership Camp. So we'd like to know what inspires you to do all that you do.
Thank you. That's a wonderful question. I always say that I believe that we all are here with a purpose that some of us have discovered and some of us haven't yet. Since I was your age or maybe even younger, I have been in public service. I've always been drawn to use my free time to volunteer, to work in areas that impact my local community, and so on and so forth. I even went to a school of public service at NYU where I received my master's in city planning with the focus on housing, economic, and community development. So I've always been committed to how we can empower, uplift, strengthen communities where we have marginalized people or people in low to medium income brackets. So for me, it was sort of a natural progression when I moved to Nigeria in 2017 to also think of how I could impact my home country once I was there. And one thing that really stood out to me is the discrepancy between the genders, the fact that women still continue to fight for their most basic rights, and the fact that they continue to be, in many ways, oppressed and challenged just in everyday society. And so being the person that I am, knowing that my purpose is to always look around and figure out how to support those that are marginalized or facing inequality, I went ahead and I founded the Bloom Africa, which is a platform for ambitious women in the diaspora, not just Africa. And the purpose of that platform is really to do anything I can to support the growth, development, upliftment of women. So everything from the Power Girls Leadership Program to programming that we've held for professional women. Recently did one for resume building and job searching and so on and so forth. And so that's really how I got into this. And I feel that, like I said at the beginning, everyone has a purpose. I think it's just about discovering it and then expressing it in as many different ways as you can, which is what I'm doing. So thank you for that question.
Certainly, ma'am. What inspires you inspires us. What do you think?
Well, I feel like that's very inspiring, like watching people who are not just taking, but also giving back to community. And so this is the second question. So I am very happy that the Model African Union is not just a conference that simulates the African Union, but then we have professionals who are into policy making, like you and the other panelists, who we can actually learn from, especially for people who want to go into the field of international politics and policy making. So now the next question is, so as a woman who is in the field of public service, what challenges have you faced? And how have you been able to overcome these challenges?
You know, I will say that in the space of public service, at least in the capacity that I've engaged with it, which has been really through working with NGOs or nonprofits, or community organizations and agencies. I'll be honest, I mean, as a woman, my gender hasn't posed much of a challenge at all. And I think that's because in those spaces, you know, the intentions are such that people just want anyone who's willing to roll up their sleeves and do the work. And so typically in that space, you are encouraged to come, you are encouraged to provide whatever skills or talents, support, resources that you can bring, you know, when you are dealing with neighborhoods or communities or individuals that are marginalized, like I said earlier, really and truly. We typically don't confront issues of gender bias in those spaces. However, having said that, you had mentioned policies and policy making, and I would say that that is not so much the case when we look at, let's say, politics or government, where we know that women continue to face these biases that we all know, you know, a little bit too well. You know, we continue to fight for seats in government. We continue to still look for female leaders of state. They're very few and far between, you know, and so on and so forth. And so typically, you know, in politics and policy making, we do know that men tend to still hold the lead in that. They still tend to dominate that space, which is not very, very encouraging for the future of our countries and of the world in general. Because when you have half of your population, in many cases, exempt from policies, exempt from decision making, you have a problem. You know, I recently saw a statistic that talked about how countries that, you know, mistreat women, and this was through the UN Women platform, that mistreat women or marginalized women tend to be countries that are very low on the development rank. And so we still have work to do, I think, in those spaces. But I do think that when it comes to on the ground work, when it comes to actually supporting those that need us immediately, I think women are encouraged to still show up and contribute what they can in those spaces. And I do believe they will be welcome.
Amazing, ma'am. Thank you so much for that, for your, you know, very insightful answer. Just keeping with the theme of the conference for this year, you know, 20 years of the African Union, propelling vision towards action. You know, I was just wondering, you've been in all these high offices, and of course, I can imagine that you are a chief advocator for, you know, effective, strong structures. You know, I was just wondering, what do you think about accountability of these superstructures in policy making and governance at the African Union? How do you think, you know, we can keep these structures accountable, you know, responsible to actually do the things that were put in place to accomplish?
Thank you. That's a great question, but it's also a complex question. You know, I think that when we observe these superstructures, as you call them, and I think rightly so, we also have to understand and accept that within the structures is the politics of it all, which oftentimes overshadows the mission and the work. I mean, these are just things that we know. Because when you create organizations that are large, that have several different sort of, I would say, points of interest within it, hierarchies, and so on and so forth, you're going to have the red tape. You're going to have, like I said, the politics play, the power plays. All of those things just kind of come with the territory. Unfortunately, these types of things do have the power to slow down the impact that we do have directly in some of the spaces that need the policy changes the most. What I have found is that superstructures, these NGOs, such as the African Union, they're important to also have, for sure, because they represent a certain voice for people, for states, and I think that that's important to have large organizations that have the power and the recognition needed to, put certain issues on the table and to center those issues so that the world is paying attention. Of course, where we do find the challenges is whether or not those issues are being addressed on the ground, whether or not we're seeing the direct impact in the spaces and amongst the people that need them the most, because there tends to be sometimes a disconnect between the office and then the ground, right? And so that's where I think the challenges continue to sort of, reveal themselves, is how we're able to translate the intentions that we have, at the desk and at seats of power, all the way down to the communities and the people that are truly impacted for them. And I think that's where we oftentimes see the breakdown. And of course, these structures oftentimes attempt to work with agencies and people that are on the ground to execute key, I would say, strategies. But again, we continue to see that, it's not as easy as we would hope to get these things done. But I do think that we need all players at the table to continue to show up and do the best that they can. And I just think that at the end of the day, where we will see the most impact, again, is going to be those folks that are on the ground, that are pushing. And that's what we've seen historically, are that the impact that we look for and we're seeking oftentimes comes from those people that are doing the hard work on the ground, the people that are the boots on the ground, as we call them.
Thank you so much for that very insightful answer. And I feel like we have learned so much from this, and how there's actually a disconnect between our leaders and people. And it would be very nice if we can have more communication and more access to people in those spaces. Okay, so now the next question is centered around leadership again on the African continent. Okay, so using the 2020 Silence the Gun initiative as an example, we see that the African Union had a set trajectory to kind of eradicate all conflicts happening on the African continent by the year 2020. However, we still see a lot of conflicts happening, like the Tigray crisis. So what do you feel some of the barriers to the AU and other independent institutions are to achieving the set goals and trajectory?
Great question. And I think it goes back to what I said just previously, which is that I spent a number of years observing the international NGOs and other NGOs. And, if I'm speaking bluntly to you, it is that, again, we have the intentions are there, behind, these large structures. But unfortunately, I think sometimes the execution just doesn't quite get us to where we're trying to go. I think campaigns are good for awareness, maybe, to raise awareness about a particular issue or topic. But in terms of actually executing what needs to be done to see those campaigns come to life, that's a whole different ballgame. My sister worked with the UN for many years. And while she was there, I think she would say that she learned a great deal about, how decisions are made at top level, with governments and leaders and states and so on and so forth. But then last year, she transitioned to a different role where she's now working with an NGO that is directly situated on the ground, going into, and she's in public health. And so going into villages, speaking to people one-on-one, finding access to resources and funneling it directly to those in need. And what she'll say is that the results are night and day. What you see when you put out a white paper or a research paper, let's say at an NGO, is completely different from the impact you see when you're on the ground and you can touch, you can feel, you can hear, you can talk to the people that are actually affected by what it is that you are trying to, impact. And so I think, like I said earlier, both are necessary because, again, you can't really, you need governmental support, you need state support to drive forward some sustainable level of change or to uphold certain policies and enforce them. But I think at the same time, you also need players, like I said earlier, that are on the ground. So in the case of the AU, I think it's, I think the intention is there in terms of, silencing the guns. But then the question becomes, what does the security apparatus look like within the different areas and states that are affected by gun violence and war and unrest? What's the status and what sort of leadership do we have on the ground? What are we doing to address that, again, on the ground level? So it's one thing to have a campaign. Like I said, I think that brings awareness, it brings focus to the issue, but I think that's completely different from what has to be done to actually implement and execute. And that gets very complicated when we're talking about state politics, when we're talking about state interests, when we're talking about geopolitics. All of those things are really complex moving machineries that really, slow down even those of us that have the best intentions. And so I think all we can do oftentimes, and what we continue to do, is just to take the multi-pronged approach. So you do have, those that are raising awareness, then you have those that are on the ground, and then you have those that are like you, young, helping us to continue the conversation, continue to help us source out leaders for the future. There's so much that we just need to continue to do simultaneously to really see the change that I think a lot of us hope to see in the work that we do.
Yeah. I agree. I agree totally, And I think it speaks a lot to, some of the things that we try to accomplish here in the African Leadership Academy Model African Union. I mean, I know that a lot of the topics, in fact, all of the topics, that we debate upon, in conference are gotten from what students have seen as real problems in their community. So, it just speaks to the essence of really being on ground, to, understand what people are going through, understanding the challenges and the barriers to, effective execution and implementation in those spaces, So I agree totally. But, that being said, we have viewers watching from all over the world. And just wanted to ask, even as we run out of time, what is some advice that you'd give to these wonderful, passionate leaders watching from wherever they may be at the moment?
one of the things that I always love to say is that we all have the power to drive change, every single one of us. And I always say to my girls that are in the Power Girls Africa Leadership Program that even if all you ever do is change one life, just pay it forward to one person, the domino effect of that is significant. So, excuse me. So we don't have to have this big, I think oftentimes people feel like, oh, I have to start this organization. I have to do this big things to make a change or to make a difference. And that's not what it is. As a city planner, there's something that we study called the spillover effects, which means that something that you do in one neighborhood can spill over into the next neighborhood, and that can then spill over into the next neighborhood. So let's say you plant a garden in your home, behind your home, and your neighbor loves that. And so they plant a garden. And then next thing you know, you have a neighborhood full of gardens and it's beautiful. And then now everybody's like, oh, look at that neighborhood. I want that neighborhood as well. So sometimes it's just starting in your own backyard, figuring out what you can do in your own little space. That's what I've done, you know. I've volunteered for different types of organizations. I currently am on the board for UNFPA. You know, I am on the board for some tech organizations that are addressing social issues. I'm a mentor for Google. I always am constantly trying to see and look around and say, what can I contribute towards? What skill sets do I have? And it's not to just contribute and to just say, oh, I did something and write it down. Take your time, even if it's one thing that you only really have time for, do that one thing and do it well. You know, so if it's raising awareness around voting rights, if it's around child marriage, like Kuti has done such an amazing job. She and her team, in case no one knows, have the highest number of signatures on change.org in Nigeria. That's huge. She brought a lot of awareness, they did, to this issue of child marriage. And so again, it's about saying, what are you passionate about? What really like kind of gets to you, and you just are like, oh, you know, and then think about what small thing you can do to impact. So even if it's volunteering for another organization, if it's contributing your time, your resources, interning, working in that space, studying about that space, advocating for people in that space, whatever thing you can do, you have done your part. And so no one should feel powerless in this world, because we all have the power to say, I can help my neighbor, I can help my classmate, I can use my social media, I can use my time. We all have something, we all have a gift that we can bring. And so I just encourage you to not always think of like, what's the biggest, loudest, you know, sexiest, most social media thing I can do. Just do your small thing and know that you are making an impact. And even if it's just one person, like I said earlier, that is impacted by that, that one person is going to go on and hopefully pay it forward to the next person. And then that person will pay it forward. And next thing you know, you've impacted a whole line of people and you had no idea. So don't ever feel like you cannot make a change. You can. One life changed is one life change, and that's a big deal. Okay, so that's what I would say.
Wow.
In LA, there's something that we do when, you know, somebody has just made so much sense. We call it snaps. We literally snap our fingers. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you so much for your time.
We have learned so much, and this session has been very inspiring. And thank you, delegates, for staying with us. And right now we have a performance from a co-host here, Michael Osai, together with Polly from Kenya, who will be performing Great Nation. Please stay tuned. We have one more segment.
Stay with us.
Moja ni fahari yetu,
ukabila hatutaki hata kamwe. Lazima tuungane, tuijenge nchi yetu, pasiwe hata moja hata itenganisha.
Here we stand as a people with one song, with one voice. We're a nation undivided and poised. We will take our stand and build our land with faith to defend what is ours. Here we are as a people with one heart for one cause. We're determined to rebuild and restore, where freedom reigns and truth prevails, a land where there's hope for us all.
Naishi natumaini, najitolea daima Kenya, hakika ya bendera ni udhabiti wangu, nyeusi ya mwananchi na nyekundu ni ya damu, kijani ni ya ardhi, nyeupe ya amani. Daima mimi Mkenya, mwananchi mzalendo.
We are all we have. We will defend our land. We believe in Africa, and we know she'll get there. We are all we have. We'll defend our land. We believe in Africa and the promise she holds, and that one day she'll shine like the sun. We're a great people.
We're a great people. We're a great people. We're a great people.
ALA welcomes you to MAU 2022.
Wow, welcome back everyone. That was an amazing performance from Michael Osai and Polly, a Kenyan student at the African Leadership Academy. And now we will begin our third segment. Michael, would you like to tell us what this segment would be about?
Of course. As mentioned earlier, this is time for the live Q&A. We have a lovely distinguished guest with us here, Kaliso and Ms. Deepshika, and we will be getting into the live Q&A right now. And so without further ado, please begin to put your questions into the chat box. We will get to it in a moment, and let's have a fun time. I see the questions coming in.
Okay, so please continue to drop your questions in the chat. Okay. This first question says, I am passionate about making change in my community, but I do not know how to start. Have you ever felt this way at any point in time? And what has helped you?
Can I go first?
Please, go ahead.
I'm so sorry if I'm buffering. The Wi-Fi here is just, but I think one of the things that I really struggled to start with was the Afrofeminist Charter that I did with my SE, my student enterprise at ALA. And it was just very daunting because I wanted to make sure that everyone's voices was equally represented. I wanted to make sure that it wasn't problematic and that it was egalitarian in the most egalitarian way. And I think, the thing that really, really helped me was speaking to my SE coach, Miss S. I think it also helped to outsource help. I think that as African leaders, yes, it's good and it's well that we are autodidactic and that we learn to help ourselves. But as I said in the panel discussion, it's also important to recognize that other people have walked your path and you're not unique to the path that you're walking. So speaking to my teachers, speaking to people that are kind of mentors, speaking to people that are experts within this field about how to start, how to navigate my own mental health within this process, how to make sure that everyone's voice is represented in the most meaningful way. Like that was just, it was difficult, but like just finding the right people, knowing the right people, DMing people on Instagram. I DM'd former members of the Afrofem team on Instagram. And it took a lot of swallowing of my pride because I'm like, I never ask for help. I can do everything on my own, but you can't. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that response.
Yeah.
Now we have a question from the Republic of Ghana. The question says, as an African person, how do you know when you have represented your country or continent well? Wow, this is a very good question.
Yeah, seems like a pretty broad one.
So how do you know when you have represented your country or continent in the right way?
I can take that one. Hello, everyone. It's so nice to see you all here. It's been an amazing experience so far. I think, as Kudi said, this is a pretty broad question, but I think it's really figuring out what are the causes that you identify yourself with, right? Because what happens is when you identify the causes that you really care about and you are passionate about, it really helps you to look at your country and your country's current position from that perspective, right? And as I said earlier, I think we have to forget this idea that we have to learn, we have to know everything about everything at all times. I think it's okay knowing that I don't, like, for example, I don't know a lot about this particular issue. So I think it's identifying that it's okay to admit that and then finding ways where you could learn about that, and making sure that whatever you're speaking about and the things that you care about is also aligned to your values and what you really care about, and not just speaking about this particular thing just because it sounds cool or it's the trend. I think it's staying grounded and true to who you are and what you believe in. And I think that will come through when you're speaking about what you care, and then that will eventually become your identity. And, you know, that's going to be the identity of your country that you carry with you everywhere you go.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I mean, I like Chinua Achebe said, you know, I remember I had this conversation yesterday with Kaliso about how Chinua Achebe was advising us young people to ensure we function in our areas of core competence, you know,
that would speak for us. And, I just agree totally and completely. We move on to the next question. Lovely, because our lovely distinguished speakers are both women. The second question from the Republic of Ghana as well says, as a woman in a place where women are not deemed worthy of being leaders, Africa, how do you make your way? Kaliso, I saw that. How do you make your way around these stigmas?
I think I think one way I make my way around these stigmas is setting standards for myself, because I know that the reality of existing in a space that doesn't want you is that there'll always be impossible standards. There'll always be impossible paths put for you, as opposed to the men or the white people or the old people within that space. And so for as long as I know that I'm living up to my best and I'm living up to who I want to become in this space, then I'm tackling those stigmas even in the most minute ways. And I think that with tackling stigmas, tackling stigmas can also come with a restriction of freedom. So if your goal going into a space is I'm going to tackle this stigma, I'm going to tackle this stigma, you're just defining yourself as the antithesis of something and not as the thesis of something. You're just defining yourself according to what you are not and not what you are. And so even when you're going to those spaces, a form of resistance is defining yourself according to what you are and not what you do not want to be. So for instance, in spaces where Black women are not welcome, the one stigma is that Black women are angry and that they're loud or whatever. And so if I go into a space and I'm no, I'm going to be timid and I'm not going to be angry, I'm feeding into that stigma by not trying to be a part of that stigma. I don't know if that makes sense. So defining yourself, knowing who you are before getting into a space. And then when you get into that space, make sure that space orients itself around you. Make sure that that space knows your boundaries and make sure that that space knows who you are. In a lot of the spaces that I exist in, it's old white men, right? Or it's white people or men that don't even want to learn how to pronounce my name. But I'm just I say my name is pronounced Khashiso, and you're going to learn how to pronounce it the way that I say it, right? And that's one boundary that I set within those spaces. And so starting with that, such a small yet big boundary, just okay, now this girl, she knows what she's talking about. She knows who she is. We're going to not define her according to the first impressions that we have of her, but also understanding that you can extend yourself grace. You can understand who you are as a person. It's just really it's really important.
Okay, thank you so much for that response. And this question is centered around confidence. So, Kagiso, at the age of 18, you have done a lot of partnerships with the United Nations and other organizations. And Ms. Dipshika, you are the Prime Minister of the National Youth Parliament in Mauritius. So this question goes, how did you build confidence when you first started? What effort did you put in and how much hard work took you to where you are today?
Listen, I am still a work in progress. I am still learning every single day. When I wake up, I tell myself that I still have a lot to learn about who I am as a person. And I think for me, it's knowing that I am on a learning journey and you can never stop learning about yourself, and also discovering who you are as a person, right? Because I feel like we haven't discovered who we are, what makes us fully human right now. So I think it's knowing that it's okay to make mistakes, but also to own those mistakes, right? Because I think we are taught at a very young age that you have to behave a certain way, you have to speak a certain way, right? So I think we have to let go of that idea and just know that who we are and what we have to bring to a table is enough. It's actually more than enough. And we shouldn't let other people define us for who we are, right? And I think for me, I am vulnerable in everything that I do. If I made a mistake, I own up to my mistakes and I apologize for it, right? It's being okay to admit your mistakes. But I think Khaliso talked about that a lot earlier today. And the first part is, stay grounded about who you are. When in 2020, when I was running for election, I was given the opportunity to be a part of one of the major political party in Mauritius, and that would mean that I would easily be elected and win without even trying. So I could just sit at home and be elected, or I could take the hard way and just stand out on my own and run as an independent candidate, while knowing that I was not going to be elected, right? But for me, it was about, what is more important? Is it winning, or is it staying true to myself and making sure that my vision and the things that I believe in is going to come through and not be influenced by other people, however powerful they might be. So I think if I didn't have the sense of my own values and what I have to bring to the table, I think I wouldn't have been here today. I would probably be part of the major political group and just, enjoying life, I guess. I don't know. But I think it's knowing who you are and owning up to your mistakes and being vulnerable to everyone around you is eventually going to help you find that confidence that you're looking for.
For me, I just have 2 quotes to just add to this. I think there's 2 quotes that really help me with my confidence. It's number 1, fake it till you make it. And number 2, walk into a room like God sent you. Like faking it till you make it has not in terms of information, like information, I cannot fake information. I do not believe in that. You have to be very informed as a leader. And I think that's one part of confidence. But faking it till you make it is if I make a mistake in my speech, I won't show that I know that I've made a mistake, because I think we as human beings and as teenagers, especially in social media, we're very nitpicky with all the mistakes that we made for the fear of, oh my God, what are other people going to say? And that what are other people going to say syndrome is what always holds people back. Like, oh my God, I just said this wrong, or I must never exist in this space ever again because I'm so problematic. But yes, understanding that you're going to grow and faking it till you make it and be like, okay, I made a mistake, but I'm still going to have my shoulders up. And then also walking into a room like God sent you. First impressions really last. And so if you walk into a room that's going to make you nervous, as if you're not nervous, already in your brain, there's this placebo effect of, yeah, I'm a boss and this is how I'm going to do things, and this is how I'm going to take charge of this room. And this is how I'm going to take up space, the space that I need to take up in this room. So yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Kaliso, for those extra quotes that you added. And then we proceed. We move on to the next question from Alexia Payne. And I think this is such an essential question because it speaks to what we know. We have seen this in so many leadership systems cause the failure or the destruction of the system or the structure in essence. The question says, as leaders, we know that we should listen to many people. So how do you think exactly we're supposed to make the difference between good and bad advice? Because sometimes it really isn't easy to tell the difference, especially in places of office, when you're in leadership roles in this office where you're in a dilemma and you have to make 2 decisions. You have to choose, between, you have to do some damage control to find out, oh, wow, how much do I hurt this person? How much does this other person benefit? How do you navigate making good choices? How do you navigate, differentiating from good advice and bad advice in a plethora of contexts?
I think I'll just quickly go. Firstly, you learn through mistakes. I honestly, I don't know the answer to this question because I'm 18 years old. I'm still learning about how to be a leader and how to make executive decisions that would impact people other than myself. And so right now I'm being very open to learning through making mistakes. And unfortunately, some of these mistakes will impact other people. But I think one thing that is very important in the leadership journey is accountability. So when I do make these mistakes, or when I do make the wrong choice in terms of who I don't and do listen to, what I need to do is take accountability for that and try to make up for that in any way that I can, instead of just sweeping it under the rug.
Okay, we're running out of time, but thank you so much for the response. And we have one more question that goes, how can people stand out? A lot of people are starting different movements, but aren't really recognized. What do people do to get their efforts and movements noticed? So this would be our last question because we don't have any more time. So who would like to go first?
I can go very briefly. I think the idea of you championing for a cause or standing what you believe in is to first make yourself be heard. And as I said before, even if it's just one person, I think that one person holds so much power that we underestimate. So I think, just you have your message, you have a cause, you have an idea that you want to push forward, you have an agenda. So please just be loud, be unapologetic about what you have to say, and just enjoy the process, right? I think it's incredible what can happen when you put yourself out there. But I think it's taking that first step and making sure that even if it's just your neighbor that's hearing you, I think it's more than enough. And you stand out because you are unique in your own way. Your voice is unique and you have so much to bring to the table as an individual. So you will stand out just by showing up and being unapologetic and 100% you.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you so much, Ms. Dipshika. We hope that all our delegates here will indeed be able to stand out in all they pursue. This brings us, of course, sadly to the end of our Executive Roundtable for the African Leadership Academy Model African Union Conference 2022. Delegates, just before we leave, we'd like to remind you that please, the conference goes on Saturday, March 26th of 2022, we need you to be seated. Let me just, even though this is of course already sent into your emails along with the Zoom links, this is just a quick rundown of the schedule. You need you to be seated by 11:45 a.m. because from 12 to 12:45 we'll have a press conference. From 12:45 to 1:45 p.m. we'll have a fourth committee session. From 12:45 to 1:45 there'll also be a simultaneous faculty advisor session running. From 2 to 4, there'll be the fifth committee session. And then the big event from 4:30 to 6 would have our cultural night. It promises to be exciting, informative, engaging, as a conference always is. And yeah, thank you for joining us today. I remain Osai Michael, and here with me is
Kudirat Abiola from Nigeria.
We're delighted to have hosted you for today. Have a wonderful day ahead. Goodbye.
ALA welcomes you to MAU 2022.